Joining me today is Dr. Dale Atkins, author of The Turquoise Butterfly. Dr. Dale Atkins, author, former Today Show expert and psychologist, is best known for sharing guidance on how to navigate life's complicated questions and uncomfortable feelings. Now she has a new mission to help generations connect and experience the joy of being present. In her new book, Grandma Sylvia is an enchanting figure who embodies the spirit of a vibrant butterfly. She's warm and welcoming, fearless and curious about everything. Her granddaughter, Victoria, often finds her belly fluttering when faced with new things and uncertainty. Woven throughout the story is the healing power of nature, offering gentle lessons about resilience and renewal. The butterfly becomes the luminous symbol of transformation, teaching young readers how to navigate loss, embrace shifts, and find hope in all life cycles. Welcome to the show, Dr. Dale Atkins.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm
Well,
looking forward to our conversation.
Great to have you here. Okay, I want to just start out with this whole concept of the relationship, intergenerational, the relationship between grandma and her granddaughter Victoria. Um, that's a special relationship. You're a grandmother, I know, so am I. So this
It's a nice club, isn't it?
yeah, it is a very nice club. And yeah, and I think this book kind of sort of hits, it really does, it rings true, I guess, for all the issues, emotional issues, psychological issues that I have with my own grandchildren. So, um, where do we want to start?
Well, I think that one of the things that I've learned along the way, and it has really been driven home since the book came out a month ago, Kathryn, is how it isn't just applicable to grandmothers and grandfathers. It's also applicable to any elder in a child's life who has a connection. And I think that that's an important thing to know because a lot of kids don't have grandparents, but there might be an uncle or an aunt, there might be a close family friend who can serve the purpose of that steady source of emotional security that all children need. I chose to write it about a grandmother and granddaughter because, in part, it's a tribute to my late mother, whose name was Sylvia, and how incredibly connected she was, how incredibly present she was, and the way she was a non-reactive listener. And I wanted to try and pay tribute to the possibility of that intergenerational connection.
And the book specifically, though, deals with grief and loss. And I think that's a topic that's often very difficult for parents to approach with their children. Sometimes, as you say, it doesn't have to be a grandparent, grandfather, or grandmother, but an older person in a young person's life who can sort of talk about these issues or talk about grief and loss in a way that parents maybe are unable to do.
There's no question about it. They can offer a presence. They don't put on the pressure. And because of their lifelong learning of
Of
everything that's
loss.
going on, of loss, yes. And often a grandparent is the first person a child loses. So if the grandparent can be able to talk about it and to be there for the child in anticipation of loss, not necessarily their own demise, but just the loss in the world, I think it's really helpful. And you raise a really good point about the parents not being able to or not being ready to. They're very busy with all the other things that are going on. And a grandparent has generally has the time and a little bit of the distance so that they really can be there for a child exploring all kinds of feelings. And, I think one of the best persons in the world to talk about death is a grandparent. And to talk about it in a way that can be comforting, reassuring, not to dwell on it, but that this is part of life and this is part of a life cycle. And that who better than someone who loves you deeply and can comfort you immeasurably to share that kind of wonder about a world that you have nothing, that you don't know anything about.
And I
And
think the word is experience here too. Experience. Yeah.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
when one reaches a certain age, you've had a lot of experience with grief and loss and love and letting go and all of those kinds of things, right? Um, and also, I think with the parents, they're afraid of losing their own parents. So that also is something that gets in the way of discussing uh, loss with their own children.
And one of the reasons that I wrote the book is to be able to help children and adults understand and accept the eternality of love. That, people talk about a legacy, and they often talk about um, money in relation to what
Yeah.
they're leaving their children and
Yeah.
material items. And that's fine and good. But the legacy that most people that I know want to leave is the one that has to do with, how will my grandchild remember me? What will be those memories? Will they know the family stories? Will they have the context for where they are in the life of this family or these people in our community? And I think that when kids have the sense that a person is being honest with them and real with them, it's also the reason I use the butterfly, the transformational quality of the butterfly, that when you see something that reminds you of someone, or you hear a song, or you visit a place, or have some kind of a sense memory like a smell. Oh, this smells just like when I went into my grandmother's house and she would be cooking X, right?
Yeah.
These are the things that make that legacy real, that you remember that person, and then you hopefully feel comforted, perhaps strengthened, perhaps more confident. Perhaps you would say, gosh, I wonder what grandma would have said to do in this situation. So that you've internalized the person and their values and their mission in life, their purpose, and that stays with a child. So there is a way to deal with grief that gives children a hope and a connection that stays with them forever. And
I
that's
think one of the
really
other
the
things,
message.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
go
I
on.
think one of the other things that you did in the book, Victoria, the granddaughter, her relationship with her grandmother, you started out, she goes to visit her grandmother every summer, and grandma is out there and doing things with her and very much engaged in the same things Victoria is. But then you slowly, the next time she visits grandma isn't quite able to do the same things. And so you kind of had, I don't want to use the word demise, but you, the kind of the progression of how grandma can't interact with Victoria in the same way that she used to. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And that's the other reason why I wanted to make it over 3 years, because we do see this very vibrant person who talks about how they're going to do have all these adventures, they're going to have all this fun, and they do. And that's the history. And then we also see in one scene where the waves come and the current takes them apart, and the grandmother does the first thing in the book that gives the child an opportunity to know how to cope when she is in a perilous situation. When she leans back and she said, look at the sky and let's sing about the butterfly. And so she gives her something to hold on to, and the grandmother appears to be totally fine and fit. But what do we see when the next moment, she's being served tea by her granddaughter, so that the granddaughter has internalized, I need to take care of grandma now. And she got me through this, but now she's really tired. And so we see not a reversal of roles, but we see an exchange of how we can have empathy and compassion for somebody else and do what they need. And in that process, the little girl becomes more responsible. She becomes more bold. She becomes more courageous while she sees her grandmother declining in various ways. And the grandmother also says, if you recall, we're still having an adventure. It's just that they're not jumping around. They're looking and they're studying and they're doing things together. And what I wanted to do was to help children and grandparents understand that at whatever stage we are in life, there's always a way to connect. And, if you're used to go out and take 5-mile walks together, but now you take a walk and you sit and you look at the ducks in the park, that's also wonderful. And if you are present, and you can still have magnificent connections, I was with a couple the other day, and the woman told me that she hadn't played chess in a while. And I said, well, why don't you play with your grandson? And she said, oh, he's so much better than I. And I said, isn't that wonderful? Let him teach you again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we can learn from our grandchildren, we can teach our grandchildren, but mostly we really just want to be in life, experiencing life with our grandchildren. And, everybody needs to have a purpose. And the kids have a purpose, and we have a purpose.
And each grandchild responds differently too, because they have unique personalities, obviously, and come from different emotional places. And I was going to ask you, because you're a grandmother of what, six?
Yes, I have six grandchildren. The
Grandchildren, yeah.
youngest just turned 13 last week, and the eldest is 21. And and they're so different from one another, and it's so exciting.
And
what
challenging.
and challenging, of course. But you also then, as a grandparent, you can develop empathy for your children who are raising children who are very different from one another. And part of the role is to be supportive of your kids in raising these very different children. And, where a parent may not have the patience for something about one child, you might be the person who gives that kid the support, the understanding that they need. They may not feel that they are as pressured. I used that word before because it comes up so often. You can listen, you're not lecturing, you're teaching, but you're teaching by example and modeling, and you're doing things together, and you're, discussing. Like if a kid has a book for a book report, you can read the book and just talk about it, not so that you're preparing the kid for the test, but just what are you learning about yourself from this book? Or what do you think that kid should have done in that situation? And you bring them to another level and another place of finding out about themselves. And I think, as importantly, bringing up things in your own life so that they know what your life was like. Because, you might meet them when you're 60, 70, 80, but what about your life as a younger person? What was it like? What did you do? Where did you go for the holidays? I find, Kathryn, that so many adults say to me, I wished I had known more about my grandparents. And why didn't I ask them this? Or why didn't they tell me that? So, it's not just kids who are different and have unique personalities. Adults do too. And some want to talk, they want to share, and some would like to not share. So how can you still connect?
Exactly. And one of my grandsons can't understand how I got along without a cell phone. That's one of the big
Right.
questions. And another one wants to know if I was alive when Lincoln was alive. No, not exactly, but yeah, it's they come from very different places. But and another
Exactly.
thing I want to add to what you said, because you can go, a friend of mine said, well, you go to all their activities and dance recitals and that stuff. And I said, but it's very different. When you're a parent, you're the one who has to get the costume for the part, for the
Yeah.
dance recital, make sure they get there on time. I just go to enjoy it. Mine is just, I don't have to worry about all that stuff, which is a
Yeah.
huge difference, is what you're saying as well.
Exactly. And it's a huge opportunity
Yeah.
because what you're looking at, you're not looking at whether or not they know the 5 steps that they need to do to make the next transition on the stage. What you're looking at is and what you as a grandparent or an elder in the family community can say is, I noticed how comfortable you felt once the music came on. Or I noticed how you were watching your little friend on the other side of the line. Or I paid attention to how when you got, when in the relay, when you gave the baton to the other runner, I saw the way you gave him a smile. In other words, you have an opportunity to observe without any expectation except to see what is the quality that I'm noticing in this child that I want to see more of? What is the behavior that I want them to know is of value to me? I noticed when that kid didn't do so well that you went over and you put your arm around him and gave him a pep talk. That was really wonderful that you did that. And these are the things that many of us think. And, even if you say it to a kid and they brush you off, say, oh, that was nothing. I want you to know that it was really wonderful. And those are the kinds of encouragements. And the same is on the other hand. I noticed that you pitched a fit when, and you threw your tennis racket. And why don't we talk about that? What was going on? What else can you do? Let's talk a little about sportsmanship, not in a pejorative way, not in a punishing way. In my experience, people who throw their tennis rackets or their whatever, or who pitch a fit on the court in front of everybody, um, need to have a little bit more self-control. What do you think you can do to deal with those feelings you have? Because you have those feelings, and I know you were disappointed with yourself. And it's really hard when you feel terrible about making the losing point, right?
Right.
But wasn't it nice the way the kids came over so that they didn't want you to feel so bad? Of course you're going to feel bad, but that's important. Sometimes grandparents see the larger picture. And when they paint that picture for the kids, it really helps them to develop a sense of perspective. And God knows when you've lived this long, thank God,
Yeah.
you can get a sense of perspective.
You definitely have a sense of, yes, that is so true. But now you're the expert. You're a psychologist. I'm a social worker, and and you have some real, obviously, insight when the kid loses the game, and you can sit down and talk about it instead of, throwing the bat or having a meltdown. What about the average? I'm saying not average, but the person who doesn't have that kind of a experience or background expertise
It's a
in.
great question,
Yeah.
because maybe their mother also throws the tennis racket,
Yeah.
or maybe, that's what they've learned. And so I think as a grandparent, you can say, I know you really felt really awful about that, but what might be another way that you could, deal with that? Or if that's just what people do in the family, I think then you say, boy, wasn't that a bummer? That was just awful. And I saw how upset you were. And that's not a moment to teach an alternative strategy. It's a moment to be able to have empathy and compassion for how the kid felt. And that's okay, because there will be another opportunity. Maybe you find a book that talks about a kid, who helped somebody else who was in a bad way. There are so many ways to approach life lessons. And again, I think that parents and grandparents teach different things, and they teach them in different ways. And they're both important, so that you don't want to undermine a parent. You definitely don't want to undermine. You want to support them. Even when you don't agree, you don't undermine the parent. You say, I know that's one way to do it. And can we think of another? Especially if you're noticing the personality of the child really could use another type of alternative, another model. And you can also use it when if you watch sports with your kids and say, wow, look at the way he dealt with that. That's amazing. What do you think he was thinking? And use models that are not necessarily just within the family, but broaden out, and be careful about who you pick as your models. And I'll go back to the Abe Lincoln. No, I wasn't alive when Abe Lincoln was alive, but there were really some amazing qualities that he had that I think we can all learn from. And this I actually refer to is, why is it important for kids to learn history?
Yeah,
Not
exactly.
just their family history, but who are the heroes? Who are the people whose values we would like to have shared within our family? And it doesn't mean that we all did it right as we were growing up. It means that as we've gotten older, we've learned things, and that's what we want to share with the kids.
Now, what about the parents? What do you do when you see the parents doing or reacting to the kid, to the child, in a way that you don't see it as positive? How do you give it? How does a grandparent give advice to the parents or the person who's taking care of the child?
Generally, the grandparent does not give advice
Yeah.
unless
Okay.
they are asked. And I think what's useful is to be able to say, is there any way I can help you right now? Right. And if somebody's losing it, they either want you to take over or they want you to go away. And is there any way I can be helpful? And I think that you have to look at every situation uniquely. If a child is in danger, you jump in. Okay. There is a certain line that I think needs to be addressed. Other than that, my experience with clients and families and a whole lifetime, and I'm sure yours too,
Mhm.
is you know when that happened, this is what I saw. Would you like my opinion? Would you like to know what I saw? I think I might have some insight. May I share it? And I think you have to be able to have a dialogue, like, and it may not be that day. It may be, a phone call after you've visited. I've been thinking about what happened. Is it possible that we could talk about it? Because I really think I saw something that I didn't notice before, and I might have some insight. And you don't come down like you are the critical parent, because whether you're, 40 raising your children or 20 raising your children, you don't want to have the critical parent. You want to have the supportive parent. And alternatively, if you see your kids raising a child in a way that you're unfamiliar with, you say, I know nothing about that. That's so new. What can I read? I'm really curious about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I want to know more about it. At the same time, when you have the grandkids to yourself, if you ever do, and they confide in you about, mom's so hard on me. I can't believe it. I'm trying my best and she doesn't even see what I'm doing. All of that, which by the way, is one of the roles of a grandparent, is to be that safe place. I think at that point, you say, I know that's really hard. And sometimes that can be all the kid needs to hear. You know, it must be really hard when you're working so hard and, your mom's asking you for those extra 2 points when you got 98 and she wants you to get 100.
Yeah.
And, and I think you can say, that's really so frustrating. And I know it makes you think that, she doesn't care about you or whatever. But I know that's really hard and you don't have to fix it. And then when they say, will you talk to her for me? And then you can say, what would you like me to say? What do you think would be helpful? And that often is all they need. They need to know that somebody is in their court when they're really feeling criticized. Or, if a kid screws up and the parents are trying to tell them that, hey, you really screwed up and, you're not going to get the car again for a week.
Yeah.
And they come over and they say, Nana, can I use your car? I say, well, no, I don't think so. What's the story? Right. So you want to be cooperative, you want to be supportive, but you also need to be a place of safety.
And I think just to add to that, I know one of my grandchildren, he just wanted to sort of talk about talk about things that were bothering him. I start to respond and give advice. And he said, Grammy, I just want you to listen.
Right. And I think that that's the best advice a child can give a grandparent or a parent, because most often that's all they need. They need a safe place to express their thoughts, their feelings, their experiences, their quandaries. And they want somebody to just listen who loves them, who they trust emotionally, as they work something out. And when they say, what do you think I should do? Or what would you do? You don't have to answer right away. You can say, I can see that these are the things you're struggling with. I'm not sure what I would do, but maybe I might try that. And you throw it out there so that it's like tossing a ball back. You don't solve the problem. You give a little bit more, you uncover something they may not have seen. So they put that into their mix of their own problem solving. Because there are a lot of kids, and Victoria in the book is one of them, who really doesn't know how to problem solve because she doesn't want to get into a problem. So she's very eager to watch and to learn and to figure out how to deal with things that are uncomfortable for her. And this is what she learns from her grandmother.
So we have a couple minutes left. Great.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
So yeah, a great book and gets you into a lot of different topics and
Yes.
relationship.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it
Yeah.
really does. The
I hope
turquoise,
so.
it does. The turquoise. I mean, I think most grandparents will definitely be able to identify with the book, with the turquoise butterfly. So, Dr. Dale Atkins, the author, tell us where we can go for more information about the book, but also about your work and maybe some of the other books that you've also written.
Well, this is my first children's book, and I've written 7 books for adults, 8 actually. And if somebody wants to find out more, I invite them to come to my website, which is www.drdaleatkins.com, which is Dale at drdaleatkins.com. And I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram and not doing very well with that. I'm really, it's like my grandma. I would love to hire all of my grandchildren to help me with that.
Yeah.
But I'm there. And the book is available. That actually sold out, Kathryn. I've never had a book sell out.
I'm not
So
surprised.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's reordered. People can pre-order it, and it'll be there soon. It's available on Kindle. I know people love to read children's books, as I do, with their grandchildren, holding the book and looking at the book. But it is available online. It's available through the publisher, which is Mascot Books. It's available, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all those places. And I really welcome feedback from people. I've learned so much, as I referenced before. Just in the month that it's out, people are writing stories about their own experiences and how the butterfly, in this context, the butterfly means that there's a connection that is always there. So whenever the little girl sees the butterfly, she's very much feeling connected to her grandmother and protected and companion feeling and all of that. And she feels warm and safe. So again, whether it's a scent or a song, I invite people to be comfortable with that moment of memory, and whether it brings tears or laughter or both, that's really what these connections and what these intergenerational moments are about, that you're present, and you're even present when you're not here in your physical body.
It brought tears. I really did start to cry reading the book, to be honest. And then I got myself together. But yeah, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. And
Really
thank you for
appreciated it. Yes.
appreciating the book. And
Yes.
and I look forward to listening to your podcast. I've really enjoyed getting to know you through your podcast. So
Great.
thank you.
We'll have you back. Thank you.
Take good care. Bye.
Bye. Joining me today is Lena Fine, author of Shattering the Mirror. Lena Fine was raised in madness by a violent and controlling mother, obsessed with household cleanliness and the beauty of her porcelain dolls. To survive, she perfected the art of disassociation, racing through school with straight A's, becoming a top producer at a high-tech company, and cooking through 2 marriages without ever slowing down long enough to fully experience life. At 51, she looks into the eyes of her dying mother, and her warped mirror finally shatters. She begins to experience life in a new way. She learns to feel and forgive, shedding her armor and embracing life. Her story is a testament that healing is possible at any age and that wholeness is priceless. Lena is a UC Berkeley engineering graduate and a philanthropist based in San Francisco, California. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you on.
Thank you.
So, Lena, okay, what about the shattering the mirror, using the mirror as a metaphor? Why did you decide to use this title?
I decided to do that because my mother, from when I was a very young child, made everything about how you looked, how you appeared in the mirror. And so I used that as a metaphor, kind of not always living by the standard of being beautiful or having my hair be straight. Um, so I wanted to shatter that mirror and also the distortions, how I saw myself in the mirror, because my mother was so abusive that I developed an armor to succeed in school, get straight A's, do well in my profession. And there was something beyond that mirror that was living from my heart. And I really didn't know until my mother was passing away that I had a protective film around my heart. And so I wanted to shatter all those projections in the mirror to find my true self.
So you spent your life up until age 51 years old overcompensating for the childhood trauma.
Exactly. And the compensation was, being a good worker and getting A's in school versus, being a whole person living from my heart.
And what was your father's role in all of this as an enabler,
My
I'm assuming?
I adored my father. He was a traveling salesman, so he wasn't home a lot of the time. And my mother was very abusive, especially when my father wasn't home. And when he came home, if she said, I was misbehaving, then I would get grounded. And that was my father's role to back up whatever my mother said.
And when you talk about abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, like what kind, how did she?
For my mother, it was physical and emotional abuse, pulling my hair, throwing things at me, and really horrendous verbal abuse,
And
shaming, abusive in that way.
yeah, and also I would say this is also abusive, and I think you did too. But I mean, you had what, 3 sisters, and always comparing you to one of
Yes.
them. Oh, I forgot.
Yes.
Yeah, and that she was the good one and you were the bad one, and that was a constant in your growing up.
Yes. Let's compare that. You're supposed to, if you're a woman, that you compare yourself. And so there was, we 4 girls in 5 years. So boom, boom, boom.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. But you
And
had,
I really thought I was the only one getting abused because the abuse came mostly when I was home alone with my mother and there was no witnesses. It wasn't until after our mother died, that my sisters and I started comparing notes and I realized they were getting abused too, always again when they were alone with our mother.
so there was no opportunity for the 3 of you or 2 of you to talk amongst yourselves during that period when you were all getting abused individually?
Exactly. We all had our own forms of protections. One of the sister that was a year younger than me, she ended up running away from home and was gone for like 30 years. So we all had different coping mechanisms. Mine was working and doing well in school.
And more than just doing well in school, I mean, you became an engineer, which
Right. Mhm.
getting into tech, all of those kinds of things which women traditionally don't do or don't reach the level that you reached, I would say, right?
Right.
Uh,
I was, in digital motion control. I moved up into vice president of sales and marketing. I literally, in the 30 years that I was working in that field, I was one of just a handful of women. So it was mostly men.
let's talk about the effect that your narcissistic mother had on your relationships with men.
um, for my mother, it was all about beauty and getting married and finding the man. So that I would say that because I had to put a film around myself of overachievement, that my picker, as far as picking men, was distorted. And it was from my heart, but not really. There was always some film around really true, authentic connection, which I think distorted the choice of men. The first man that I married was a really super nice guy, but a little bit on the spectrum. And we connected in that way as far as being engineers. And the second marriage was somebody that was more of the, drinking party boy. So I chose two opposites. And there you have it.
Those were the two marriages, but then the last relationship with Stefan
Yeah, and my
was it?
relationships,
Yeah.
yes, I would say that as when my mother died at 51, that started a journey of healing and exploring different relationships with men and coming more into my own self, which was most to really step into my feminine and be who I am with my full heart, my intellect, and my body all combined as one. And that was a journey. My mom died at 51. I'm now in my late 60s. So that journey about whether I'm by myself or with a man, of being always showing up as whole and real without that protective armor that I carried so well.
Yeah, and you came to, I think one of the things that struck me was you in your relationship with at the near the end of the book, I guess it was, but
Mhm.
Stefan, because you started reacting to him in the same way that your mother reacted to you, that kind of
Exactly.
intergenerational trauma stuff,
Exactly.
pushing him away or
Yeah,
overreacting or, the same kinds of behaviors that your mother. Yeah.
exactly.
Uh,
Yes, that's look in that mirror. We
yeah.
got to shatter that one too. Yes.
Uh,
Thankfully, I've shattered that mirror, and so I don't do that anymore.
The I listened to the book on Audible, and I was also struck by, I think one of the things that you said was when you were actually doing the voiceover for the book, that here was this young sound engineer listening to you. I never thought
Yes.
about this before, and here and being really uncomfortable because you felt that he may be, you felt that maybe you were being shamed or
Yeah.
judged. Yeah.
And I wasn't, what was so healing about the whole thing is no matter how many baubles I made in reading my book, or no matter how personal, it was definitely a woman's story. Uh, this audio engineer was the same age as my son in his, 30s, and I was terrified, but I worked through it, and not once did this man shame me. It was really extraordinary. And having that experience of reading something so personal out loud and have not received shame was really profound.
So that was worth the 3 years of therapy.
It was. I
Right.
mean, it's been a journey, learning how being in my body, being dancing, being more in my voice through singing, all these different modalities. And who knew that reading my book out loud with a 30-something male, as the sound engineer would have such a profound impact. I would say that removed that last layer of film around my heart that was in fear. It's really been extraordinary. I feel a marked difference since I did the audio version of the book. And
Yeah,
also, since I thought I'd never actually publish, so I was fear of being shamed, and the feedback I've received from women, especially, has not been shaming at all. That's also been very healing.
yeah, I would imagine that from reading. I mean, the book was, I like the way you went back and forth. It wasn't linear. It was sort of back and forth in your life, more back and forth in terms of the emotions, I guess, that you were experiencing, right? And the changes, your internal changes.
Yeah,
Um,
yes.
Now, I have here in a note that that you what is this book going to do for other women? I mean, you're getting really positive feedback,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. What's it going to do for us?
Well, I think what I'm finding is the demographic that is resonating is women in my older age group, more mature women, and my goal is if somebody reads it and is touched and is saying, "Oh, me too," um, then I want them to experience that same aha moment of maybe there's a different way of showing up, of having a full voice. What's most important is being in your heart. I mean, you hear that, but it's a metaphor. What does it really mean to actually remove all the blocks to being your most authentic self? And to show up in the world and walk as a blessing with a full heart instead of, with this shield that and a sword and an armor. And if women could read my story, which was very hard for me to put on the page and to be that exposed, and they can say, wow, I see something in there that I'm doing that same behavior. And if they have that aha moment of, oh, this is what it means to really be in your heart, then to live a more fully expressed life, I'm saying Yahoo.
And you've also said, as I understand it, live with intention, get braver and braver, right? As you,
Right. Especially, I'm just out there in the world, whether I'm picking up coffee somewhere, I feel that I'm, for the first time in my life, making an authentic eye contact connection. Thank you for this coffee. It's so good. I mean, that's a small example, but over and over again, whether it's with my grandkids or with my children or with my friends or strangers, my relationships are better because I'm more courageous and I'm more authentic and I'm kind. I'm don't have a shield, and I also don't have that sword where I'm taking off someone's head if they didn't make my coffee right. I know that
yeah.
sounds terrible, but it's metaphor.
But it sounds very realistic. I mean, I think, yeah. Uh, so what about your children and your grandchildren? And I mean,
I adore them.
yeah.
They're so, I mean, my son and daughter in their 30s are both married. My daughter has 18-month-old little girl, Amelia, and my son uh, has a 3-year, a little boy that just turned 3, Emerson. And they are just adorable. They both live in the Pacific Northwest, and I fly from San Francisco usually every other month to see them both.
Eh,
Or
eh,
FaceTime. I love being a grandma. It's the best.
well, how much do you share with them? I mean, you've had quite an experience. You've had a lot of experience. Now you're in your late 60s. You've been through
I
all of this. Yeah. How much do you share with them?
Well, my daughter, we were actually traveling during the pandemic, and I started reading her chapters from my book. She was the first one that heard it, and she was driving the car, and she was saying, "Mom, that's really good. You need to write that." My son, on the other hand, was like, "Nope, I'm not going there. I don't want to hear any of this. I don't want to read this." So it's definitely a woman's book, and my daughter's been incredibly supportive. My son's supportive, but he hasn't read the book, and I don't blame him, actually.
Yeah. That's tough. That's real. Yeah, I would imagine, right? But
He's setting good boundaries. It's great.
um, but there's some expression like this is good for women and the men who love them, or I forget where that comes from. So you might,
Yeah.
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 And maybe as he matures or gets older, I should say,
Yeah.
sure, he
Yeah.
will be ready to read it. Everybody has to do it in their own time, I guess is what I'm saying. There was also something about you and your sister, because sibling relationships obviously are important. And was it your sister Kathy who you thought was the favored sister, and then when your mother died, you realized she wasn't. the favored, you were actually the favored sister in the sense, considered the most responsible, the
I was the
brightest.
favored son.
You were the favored son. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my mother used to attack me for how I looked, that I wasn't feminine, that I, you know, was klutzy. I had this massive curly hair that I refused to get straightened, that kind of thing. And my older sister, she's only 14 months older than me. She had the long hair and the thin,
Body.
body. And she got the ballet dances and I never dancing lessons and I never did. So there was this set up with her. She lives right down the street from me in San Francisco. So things have been healed. We're both mature, but really that much the relationship with all my sisters improved after our mother's death, because after our mother died, we all, sat in a room and started comparing notes like for the first time. Just really developing more real relationships where no one was the enemy, either no one was the pretty one or the smart one. It
Yeah.
was us being ourselves. And it was profound, the
Yeah.
healing.
I thought that was so significant because I think siblings don't do that. You don't have to wait till mother dies or daddy
Yeah.
dies. I mean, you can do it beforehand, maybe.
Yeah.
That's the lesson because you have these kinds expectations that aren't based on reality, right? Because you don't have the information. And especially when you have, well, not as I was going to say you can have one or two kids in the family, but you had four.
Yeah.
And yeah, because
And the big thing that my mother did was relentlessly compare. And she usually did the attacking. We didn't know this at the time when we were alone with her. So I thought, oh, I'm the bad one. My other sister thought, oh, I'm the, we all had a label, not, and when I really think about it, the relentless attacks from my mother were mostly when you were in a room alone with her.
And I would assume she was very much aware that that's what she was doing,
Oh, yeah.
pitting you against one another.
Totally. It was like
Yeah.
competition. It was it's complex, but it really took, it was really on my mother's deathbed. She was intubated. She was diagnosed with lung cancer and died within a week and a half of her diagnosis. But on her last few days of life, and she was intubated, she could only communicate with her eyes. And it was the first time it was like there was light in her eyes for the first time. And she couldn't speak, but it was as if it was the beginning of that film coming off, of the beginning of the mirror being shattered, that, oh, there is a real mother in there with a heart.
Yeah.
She's getting it on her deathbed. That was profound.
And what about your father after your mother died? What was your relationship?
It was I saw a whole new different person.
Yeah.
My father lived 15 years after my mother. I got to see him more free. He'd come over to my house for dinner once a week. He told me about his new girlfriends. I got to see him in new relationships, being a whole person that wasn't just traveling all the time to escape the chaos in the house.
So the mirror shattered for everyone, not
It
right?
totally shot. I mean, I was at my father's deathbed. All my sisters were at my father's deathbed. I mean, it was just profound, the healing that had come about in our family. Profound.
You also talk about the critical red flags every woman should watch out for. Let's talk about that. Looking for and I'm quoting this, impeccable, safe space to heal and understand themselves. What are
Yeah.
those red flags?
I mean, what I've learned now, because my eyes are more clear, my heart is more clear, that I would say that my picker or my relationships with men are more authentic because I'm being more authentic. So what I would call that kind of leaky energy where, a man is kind of on the prowl and on the make, I was really susceptible to that. And I'm not anymore. Now it's like, who's in front of me? How does my heart feel about it? Is this person having authentic communication? Do I feel like I'm just really listening to that radar that was covered up with too much kind of past trauma to be able to trust and tell the work that I did after my mother died. So the red flags would be, you know, owning my own femininity and sexuality and owning my voice and really, really trusting my intuition and my ability to have a voice so that I can see if I'm looking at a man, what am I really seeing in the mirror?
Your own mother was an only child.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. An only child during the Depression. Her parents both worked.
Your relationship though with your grandparents or with your grandmother.
It
Was
was
it
incredible. I had both my mom's parents, my grandfather, my grandmother lived till 99, and my grandfather lived until his 80s. I had really good relationships with both of them.
which I'm making this assumption mitigated or helped to mitigate some of the trauma and the horrors you were going through growing up with your mother, your narcissistic mother.
Yeah. And I also had amazing, from a really young age, amazing girlfriend. I still have, since I was like in first grade, this really amazing group of girlfriends that is still in my life today and going throughout. So I have extraordinary relationships with women, which is what I really needed was even as a little child, even if I couldn't articulate it, I needed that kindness, a friend that would really see me.
So when it came to girlfriends, you were able to create an intimate relation. I don't
Yes.
necessarily mean sexual, but
Yeah.
yeah, that you had the ability to do that. I mean, it was there.
Yeah, it's funny because we're now all, in our 60s and we get together every couple of years. And the last time I was said something, something about my mother, and they go, of course we knew your mother was abusive.
Mm.
And I'm like, you did?
Uh-huh.
Because I didn't really talk about it, as a teenager. I was like, oh, I'm grounded again, but that's pretty typical for a teenager. So I think the extraordinary woman relationships that I've developed over the years has been great.
We have a couple minutes left. There's so much to get into in your book, and I'm not surprised that women are into it and that it's very successful. I mean, it's great. And I'm talking obviously to the author, Lena Fine. Lena, tell us where we can.
The book is on Amazon in Kindle format and paperback format, and Audible just came out. So Amazon, and it's also on BookBaby and other bookstores, but mostly you can get it online at Amazon.
So it's available. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm a fan. I really enjoyed listening to it because then I also got to hear your voice. And by the way, I mean, I don't know, your reading was really good. Sometimes I try to listen to a book on Audible and the author should not be doing the
Oh,
voiceover. And then I have to go back. Yeah, but
thank you. I appreciate that. It was hard. It
yeah.
really takes a lot of concentration.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's
Yeah.
very difficult.
Yeah.
But anyway, good luck with the book and thanks
Thank
so
you
much
so
for,
much.
yeah, thank you too. Yeah, great having you on the show. Lena Fine.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.